What just happened to all of you? It's about to get worse.
Joanna, we know you've spoken with the baptizer.
John, something's happening. John, there's a plot. They're going to kill you.
The Chosen Season 5. Episode 1 begins right where everything changed, but no one is ready for what comes next. If you thought the raising of Lazarus was intense, or if Joanna's decision to leave Chusa gave you chills, then get ready. Because this episode doesn't slow down. From the very first moment you feel the pressure building. The city is watching. The disciples are nervous, and the Sanhedrin, they are terrified. Jesus enters Jerusalem like a king, but everyone knows this is more than a celebration. This is a declaration, a bold, dangerous, holy challenge to every power in the land, both religious and political. And behind the scenes, something dark is already moving. Betrayals are forming, doubts are growing. And Jesus is walking straight into it all. The moment Jesus entered Jerusalem on the donkey, everything shifted. It wasn't just a crowd shouting Hosanna. It was a cry of revolution, of hope, of desperation. People laid their cloaks down, cut branches, shouted praises. But what they didn't know was that this entrance wasn't just a fulfillment of prophecy. It was a threat. A direct threat to both Rome and the religious elite. The people saw a king, but the Sanhedrin saw a rebel. And Rome saw a problem they couldn't control. Episode 1 doesn't hold back on this. The tension in the streets is thick. Pilate is watching. The Pharisees are whispering. And inside the temple plans are already being made. Jesus rides in with peace in his eyes, but the storm behind him is real. He knows what's coming. And yet he still goes. That's what makes this moment so powerful. It's not just a triumph. It's a sacrifice already beginning. And while the people shout his name, not everyone is cheering. Shmuel watches from a distance and his heart is torn. He wants to believe. He's seen too much to ignore. But he's also afraid. He's still holding onto the law, to tradition, to everything he was taught. And then there's Judas. His eyes are watching the crowd, but his thoughts are somewhere else. Episode 1 gives us a glimpse of his inner struggle. The way he looks at the adoration Jesus receives and wonders where it's all going. You can feel that he's about to make a choice. A terrible one. But not yet. Then there's Joanna. She's not just following Jesus now. She's stepping into a new life. She left everything. Her status, her marriage, her safety. In episode 1, we see her in a whole new light. No longer in the shadow of Chusa, no longer a passive observer. She walks among the other women now, with purpose, with peace, with boldness. And there's a quiet power in her presence. You feel like she's finally where she belongs. Claudia, too, is watching from the palace. She sees the same Jesus from her dreams, the one who gives peace but brings fire. Pilate can't see it, but she can. Her conversation with him is short but heavy. You can tell she's troubled, afraid maybe not of Jesus, but of what her husband might do. Because Pilate is losing control, and he knows it. The disciples are walking beside Jesus, and you can tell they're proud, but uncertain. Some are smiling, others are scared. Peter holds his head high, but his eyes give him away. He knows this won't end quietly. Thomas, Matthew, Simon Z, they all feel it. Something has begun, and there's no turning back. And when Jesus looks at them and says, "This is the hour," there's no music, no cheering, just silence. And that silence says more than words ever could. But the most haunting part of episode 1 is what's not said. It's in the glances, the pauses, the way people look at Jesus, some with love, others with fear, some with hate. The city is watching, waiting. And beneath the surface, the betrayal is already in motion. There's a moment in the Season 5 trailer that passed by quickly, but it says everything. A figure standing in the shadows. A voice warning Rome will descend on us all, and Jesus walking straight into the temple like he owns it. Most people saw the crowd, the celebration, the palm branches. But what the trailer really hides is the growing panic behind the scenes. The Sanhedrin is cracking. For 4 seasons, they've been dismissive, even arrogant. But now in episode 1, their fear is louder than their pride. The people have turned their eyes away from the temple and toward Jesus. That's what scares them. He didn't just enter Jerusalem, he disrupted the entire structure of power. And they know it. You can feel it in the way they talk to each other. Caiaphas's voice is no longer steady. He's trying to hold the council together. Shmuel brings reports, but even he is unsure now. Yosef says little, but when he does, it's with hesitation. What the trailer didn't show is that these men are divided, and divided enemies are dangerous. They'll do anything to restore control, even if it means crossing lines they swore they never would. And while the Sanhedrin is unraveling, Jesus remains calm. That's the part that chills you. The city is exploding with energy, shouting noise chaos, but Jesus walks with total peace. Episode 1 lets that contrast breathe. The people are emotional, the leaders are panicking, but Jesus, he's steady, focused, almost like he's already seen the end, like he knows what's coming and has made peace with it. That's what breaks your heart the most. He knows the cheers will turn to cries. He knows the same people waving palm branches will later scream, "Crucify him," but he still rides on. He still speaks love, and when he sees the temple, his face changes. Not with anger, not yet, but sorrow, a deep sadness. Like he knows what's happening inside those walls. Like he can already see the money changers, the corruption, the spiritual emptiness, and he knows he'll have to do something about it. Meanwhile, the disciples are still struggling to understand. Episode 1 shows us their private conversations, the tension among them. Some want to celebrate the crowds, others are suspicious. Thomas wonders if this is the moment Jesus finally takes power. Simon Z is hoping for action. Even John, usually calm, looks shaken by the weight of the moment. But it's Peter who voices what they're all thinking. What are we really doing here? He doesn't ask it to challenge Jesus. He asks it because he knows something is coming, something bigger than all of them. And when Jesus looks at him and says, "To fulfill what was written," it's not just a line, it's a warning. And then there's Judas. He smiles in the crowd, claps along, but the camera lingers on him just a little longer than the others. He's watching everything, measuring, thinking. The seeds of betrayal are planted silently, but we can feel them growing. He's not just tempted by money, he's confused, disillusioned, maybe even angry. The kind of anger that feels righteous, but leads to ruin. Episode 1 doesn't make Judas the villain yet. That's what makes it so effective. It shows us his struggle, his humanity. And that's what hurts, because we know where his path leads. And he's already taking the first steps. And just as the episode begins to quiet down, just when it seems like everyone is settling in, a warning comes. A whisper through the streets. The Romans are watching. It's not shouted. It's barely spoken. But it spreads like fire. Because if Jesus continues this path, if the crowds grow larger, if the Sanhedrin takes action, Rome will not wait. Pilate doesn't want trouble. But trouble has arrived. And episode 1 ends with the weight of that threat hanging in the air. Peace on the outside, but pressure building beneath the surface. Something is coming. And no one, not the Sanhedrin, not the disciples, not even the crowd, fully understands what they've just welcomed into their city. The temple stands tall in Jerusalem, a symbol of power, purity, and tradition. But in Season 5, Episode 1, it's no longer a sanctuary. It's a battlefield, not with swords or fire, but with truth and fear colliding face to face. From the moment Jesus enters the city, his eyes are set on the temple. And though he doesn't confront the merchants just yet, the storm is coming and everyone feels it. Episode 1 builds the tension slowly. The disciples walk through the city, seeing how the temple is treated more like a market than a house of prayer. Coins clinking, animals crying out, people shouting, bargaining, hustling. It's not just business, it's exploitation. And Jesus sees all of it. His silence in those moments is louder than any words. He doesn't react immediately, but you can see it in his eyes. He's gathering strength, waiting for the right time. And when he finally returns, it won't be with quiet words. It'll be with righteous fury. But episode 1 lets us sit in the anticipation first. The kind of tension that makes you hold your breath. The Sanhedrin senses it too. Their grip on the temple is slipping. Caiaphas and his allies know that if Jesus sets foot in those courts and speaks with authority, the people will follow him. And if the people follow him, their own authority vanishes. That's why their conversations in episode 1 feel more desperate than ever. They aren't just plotting now, they're reacting. They're watching Jesus, watching the people, and realizing they're outnumbered. But they still hold one advantage, fear. They believe they can scare the people back into obedience. But they underestimate how far hope has already spread. That's what makes Jesus' presence so threatening. He's not just preaching anymore. He's confronting, challenging. And every step he takes toward the temple feels like a challenge to the very core of their system. Even within the temple ranks, cracks are beginning to show. Some priests are questioning what they're doing. Others look at Jesus with curiosity, not hatred. And then there's the growing sense that something divine is at work. Even if they don't want to admit it, they feel it. The atmosphere is different. The city is stirred. Pilgrims arriving for Passover talk more about Jesus than about the sacrifices. And every whisper that reaches the ears of the Sanhedrin only adds to their fear. He healed Lazarus. He speaks with the authority of Moses. He rode in like a king. They hear these things and know that something must be done. But the more they talk, the more divided they become. Meanwhile, among the disciples, there's a sense of awe and confusion. Matthew the thinker is trying to understand how prophecy is being fulfilled before his very eyes. Thomas keeps wondering what role he's supposed to play in all this. And Simon Z sees signs of rebellion everywhere. Not from Jesus, but from the people. They're hungry for something new. They're ready for change. And he's torn between his old instincts and this new way of peace. But it's Peter who once again steps forward, sensing the pressure rising. He begins to take on more leadership, trying to keep the group steady. Because they all feel it. Jesus is preparing for something big. And they don't know what it is. Not yet. But they know it's coming. And then there's the undercurrent no one is speaking about. But everyone feels betrayal. Judas is growing more distant, not openly, not rebelliously, but slowly, quietly. Episode 1 doesn't show his betrayal, but it lays the foundation perfectly. A look here, a question there, a moment of hesitation when the others move forward. He's wrestling with something, and it's getting harder to hide, especially when he sees Jesus in the temple. Calm, silent, watching. That silence pierces him in a way that words never could. Because Judas wants action. He wants a king who strikes back. But Jesus watches and waits. And just when you think the episode has reached its quietest moment, something shifts. A murmur begins in the streets. Word spreads that Jesus is preparing to speak at the temple. People start gathering again. The merchants pause their work. Even the priests come out hoping to challenge him publicly. But episode 1 holds that confrontation for later. It ends with Jesus standing just at the edge of the temple courts, looking at the place that was once holy and seeing what it's become. He doesn't speak yet. But we know what's coming. And the Sanhedrin knows it too. The calm before the cleansing, the peace before the whip. And in that silence, we realize the temple isn't ready for what's about to happen. But Jesus is. As episode 1 moves deeper into the heart of Jerusalem, something begins to unravel. Not just in the temple or in the Sanhedrin, but within the disciples themselves. The tension is no longer just around them. It's between them. The closer they get to Jesus' purpose, the more they start to question it. You can feel it in the glances, exchange the nervous silences, the unfinished sentences. Jesus is speaking less, but when he does, his words cut deeper. He talks about death more openly now, about sacrifice, about betrayal. And the disciples start to feel like they're standing at the edge of something they don't fully understand. Episode 1 doesn't give us answers. It gives us pressure. Pressure that pushes everyone closer to the breaking point. The kind of pressure that reveals what people are really made of. It's in this pressure that Judas begins to drift even further. He listens, he nods, he follows, but he's somewhere else. The others don't notice yet. Not really. They think he's just quiet. Maybe tired, but the audience knows better. The shift in him is subtle but heartbreaking. He no longer looks at Jesus with awe. He looks with calculation. He's searching for something that Jesus refuses to offer: power, clarity, control. And as he walks through the city, sees the crowds, hears the rumors, he begins to believe that Jesus might be squandering his moment. Judas wants a revolution, and Jesus keeps talking about surrender. That's the turning point. It's not hatred that will lead him to betrayal. It's disappointment. It's misunderstanding. It's the slow-burning belief that maybe he understands the mission better than Jesus does. But it's not just Judas. Even the most faithful are shaken. Peter's confidence is cracked by what he doesn't know. John feels the weight of prophecy in ways he's never felt before. And even Mary, Jesus' mother, watches with quiet grief, knowing the triumphal entry was only the beginning of her son's suffering. That's what makes episode 1 so powerful. It doesn't celebrate the arrival in Jerusalem like a victory march. It shows it for what it truly is, a countdown. The first step in the final journey. The beginning of the end. And that sense of looming tragedy makes every joyful shout from the crowd feel heavier. They're celebrating something they don't understand. They cheer for their Messiah, but they don't know what he came to do. Meanwhile, the Sanhedrin is no longer trying to contain Jesus. They're preparing to destroy him. Episode 1 shows their fear turning to rage. They no longer care about Roman diplomacy or appearances. Caiaphas calls an emergency meeting in the darkness. If he continues, he says the people will crown him, and then Rome will crush us all. Someone suggests arresting him quietly. Another warns that the people will riot, but the decision is already made. Jesus must be silenced, and the question becomes how. That's when someone mentions a name, not with certainty, not even with accusation, just a quiet question. Does he trust them all? The room goes silent. Because everyone knows what's being implied. They don't need a trial. They need access. Someone close. Someone who knows where he sleeps, where he walks, where he prays. And that's when Judas's name lingers in the air, unspoken but real. Episode 1 never confirms the deal. It doesn't need to. It plants the seed. And we, the viewers, are left holding our breath. We know what's coming. We know who will do it. But seeing the moment when darkness begins to wrap its fingers around Judas's heart, it hurts in a different way. Because we still remember the man who gave up everything to follow Jesus, the man who once smiled beside the others, who once believed. And now standing in the holy city, surrounded by worshipers, he feels more alone than ever. And while betrayal brews in silence, Jesus moves with unwavering purpose. In a quiet moment with his disciples, he tells them, "This is only the beginning." The line lands heavy, because it doesn't sound like hope. It sounds like warning, like promise, like prophecy. And we know every step from here leads closer to the cross. But Jesus isn't afraid. He walks forward, head high, heart open, eyes fixed on what lies ahead. The disciples may not understand, the crowd may not see, the leaders may plot, but Jesus walks into it all with love. As the final moments of Season 5, Episode 1 unfold, everything feels quieter. But not because the danger has passed. It's the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. The kind of silence that settles when everyone knows something is about to change forever. Jesus has entered Jerusalem. The people have welcomed him with cheers, songs, and palm branches. But the cheering has stopped. The crowds are going home. The sun is setting over the city, casting long shadows on stone walls and uneasy hearts. And now in this fragile stillness, the weight of the week ahead begins to settle over everyone. The disciples sit in small groups whispering about what just happened. Some are excited, some confused, some afraid. No one speaks it aloud, but they all feel it. Something huge is coming and they don't know if they're ready. Jesus is silent now, withdrawn into thought. Not because he's unsure, but because he knows exactly what's next. The betrayal, the trials, the cross. And still he chooses to stay. He could leave the city, disappear into the hills, avoid what's coming. But he doesn't. Episode 1 shows us a Jesus who is fully aware of what lies ahead and still walks straight into it. And that's what makes him different. That's what makes him dangerous to the religious leaders and unforgettable to the people. He's not trying to protect himself, he's preparing to give himself up. And the closer we get to that sacrifice, the more the characters around him start to fracture under the pressure. Even the most loyal followers begin to question what they've signed up for. Simon Z, once eager for a fight, starts to wonder what kind of revolution this really is. Thomas keeps asking questions about the Passover preparations, but you can tell his mind is somewhere else, trying to piece together the meaning behind everything Jesus has been saying. Matthew writes, listens, calculates, and senses that the story unfolding is bigger than he can record. And then there's Peter, who watches Jesus more closely than anyone. He's trying to read him, trying to prepare himself. But the truth is, he's not ready. None of them are. And just outside their circle in the dark corners of the city, the wheels of betrayal are beginning to turn. Episode 1 never shows the moment Judas makes the deal. But you feel it coming. You see it in his distance, in his silence, in the way his eyes flicker whenever Jesus speaks. There's a storm brewing inside him. Conflict, confusion, anger, pride. And that storm is about to change everything. Because while the disciples sleep and the leaders scheme, Judas will make a choice that sends the entire world spinning. Not yet, but soon. Then the final scene lands with haunting beauty. Jesus stands alone looking over the city. The temple glows in the distance. The streets are still. And in the quiet, he whispers a prayer. Not one of fear, but of surrender. He knows the cost. He knows the pain that's coming. And still, he chooses love. That's the heartbeat of episode 1. It's not just a setup, it's a calling. A call to follow him even when it gets hard. A call to trust him even when the road leads to the cross. A call to believe that what looks like defeat is actually the beginning of victory. This is the start of the most powerful week in history. A week of betrayal, suffering, love, and redemption. And season 5. Episode 1 captures the weight of it perfectly. It doesn't rush. It doesn't explode with action. It builds, slowly, carefully, like a match held to dry wood. And now, with everything in place, the spark has been struck. The fire is coming. And when it does, nothing will ever be the same. What did you feel watching this episode? Who do you trust right now? And who are you worried about? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget, this is just the beginning.